Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a moment so quiet, so invisible, that it feels like nothing is happening yet everything has changed. Imagine someone who once held power over your emotions, your time, your energy, suddenly realizing they no longer control you. This is the story of what happens when the narcissist faces the truth that you have given up. Tonight, we will walk through the 7 stages of their internal collapse and, more importantly, uncover the unstoppable power, peace, and freedom that emerge when you finally choose yourself. Stay with me. Every word will change how you see yourself. Silence is never just the absence of sound. In emotionally charged relationships, silence becomes a language all its own. When you stop reacting, arguing, explaining, or defending yourself, you aren't giving up, you are choosing awareness over exhaustion. That moment, often misunderstood, is the true turning point. It's when you realize that no amount of effort will create mutual understanding, and no explanation will ever be enough for someone who feeds on reaction rather than connection. For the narcissist, your silence is deeply unsettling. They are accustomed to emotional feedback, whether it's love, anger, tears, or confusion. All of it confirms their importance. When that feedback disappears, it creates a psychological vacuum. They sense a shift before they can name it. The familiar rhythm is gone. The predictable dance has stopped. And for the first time, they are no longer leading. Silence signals something they fear more than confrontation, loss of access. As long as you engage, they remain relevant. As long as you respond, they can influence the emotional atmosphere. But when you go quiet, you remove yourself from the equation. You stop supplying the emotional energy that sustained the dynamic. That's why silence feels threatening. It cannot be manipulated easily. For you, silence is not passive. It is active restraint. It is self-respect learning to speak without words. It is the moment you choose inner peace over being understood by someone unwilling to listen. Silence marks the internal decision that you no longer need validation from the person who hurt you. This is why silence becomes irreversible. Once you experience the calm that comes from disengagement, returning to chaos feels unnatural. The body remembers the relief. The mind recognizes the clarity. And without any dramatic announcement, a boundary is formed, not one built to punish, but one built to protect. That is why silence isn't the end of the story. It's the moment the story finally begins to belong to you. And when that silence settles in, something else begins to unravel control. Because the truth is, what they called power was never strength. It was proximity. It was access to your emotions, your time, your energy. As long as they could reach you, they could steer the moment. They could provoke a reaction, rewrite a story, shift blame, or pull you back into the familiar cycle. Control lived in the space between stimulus and response, and silence erased that space. When you stop reacting, they don't just lose your attention, they lose their leverage. There is no argument to hijack, no emotion to twist, no explanation to dismantle. The strings they once pulled now hang loose in their hands. And that's when unease turns into urgency. Because without control, the illusion of superiority begins to crumble. They may try to reclaim it through escalation, stronger words, sharper tones, exaggerated gestures. Sometimes they'll shrink instead, playing the victim, hoping guilt will reopen the door. But underneath every attempt is the same realization, dawning slowly and painfully. The dynamic has shifted, and they are no longer in charge of it. For someone who built their identity on dominance, this loss is disorienting. Control wasn't just a tactic, it was the foundation of how they felt safe in the world. Without it, they feel exposed, vulnerable, ordinary. And that is terrifying. Choose someone who cannot tolerate being unseen. Meanwhile, you begin to understand something quietly powerful. Their control never came from who they were, it came from what you gave. Your empathy, your patience, your willingness to keep trying. And when you withdrew that permission, the balance changed. This is the moment you reclaim yourself. Not through confrontation, but through clarity. You realize that control only exists where consent exists. And by stepping back, by choosing yourself, you didn't take something from them. You simply stopped handing it over, and once control slips through their fingers, something even more fragile is exposed. The difference between ego and identity. Because what looked like confidence was never rooted in self-knowledge. It was built on reflection, on admiration, on being seen as exceptional. When you were present, responding, engaging, reacting, you unknowingly helped hold that image together. You confirmed who they believed they were. But when the attention fades, the ego has nothing to lean on. This is where the collapse turns inward. Without an audience, the performance feels hollow. Compliments don't echo the same way. Victories feel smaller. Even their own reflection no longer reassures them. The voice that once demanded admiration now whispers doubt. And for someone who never learned how to build an identity from within, that doubt is unbearable. Ego needs witnesses. It needs applause, agreement, validation. Identity, on the oath, Our hand survives in solitude. And when you step away, you unknowingly force a confrontation between the two. The ego scrambles, seeking proof, seeking reassurance, seeking anyone who will reflect the old image back. But the deeper truth keeps surfacing. Without constant reinforcement, the mask begins to feel heavy. They may overcompensate, boasting louder, posting more, surrounding themselves with people who don't ask real questions. Not because they are thriving, but because they are trying to outrun the emptiness. The more they chase admiration, the clearer it becomes how dependent they are on it. And here's the quiet contrast unfolding at the same time. While their ego destabilizes, your identity strengthens. You no longer need to be seen to know who you are. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's reaction. What once drained you now clarifies you. This is the unspoken shift. You stopped feeding an ego that needed you to feel whole. And in doing so, you began building something real inside yourself. They lose a reflection. You gain an identity. And that difference changes everything. And when the ego can no longer be stabilized, when admiration no longer arrives on demand, the shock sets in. This is the moment withdrawal hits them, not all at once, but like a slow, disorienting fog. They wake up sensing something is missing, yet they can't immediately name it. The familiar emotional supply is gone, and with it, the certainty of their influence. Your absence doesn't register as loss at first. It registers as confusion. A disruption in the pattern they assumed was permanent. They replay conversations in their mind, searching for the moment things change. They test the silence, expecting it to break. Because in their world, distance has always been temporary. People come back. People re-engage. People need them. And when that doesn't happen, the shock deepens. This isn't grief yet, it's disbelief, a kind of emotional vertigo. The ground that once felt solid now shifts beneath them. They reach out, sometimes casually, sometimes strategically, just to see if the connection still exists. Not to reconnect emotionally, but to confirm their relevance. Your response, or lack of one, becomes the answer they weren't prepared for you. The distance feels different. What they experience as shock, you experience as clarity. The space you created begins to feel breathable. You notice how much energy you were expending just to keep the dynamic alive. And as the fog lifts, you realize that what felt like love or loyalty was often just endurance. This contrast is what makes the withdrawal so jarring for them. You are moving forward quietly, while they are standing still, waiting for a signal that never comes. The absence forces awareness. Not immediate accountability, but recognition that something they rely on has ended. And once awareness creeps in, it can't be undone. The illusion that you would always be there starts to crack. The silent E becomes undeniable. And in that space, the realization begins to form. This wasn't a pause. This was the end of access. And when that realization lands, when they sense that this isn't a pause, but a permanent shift the mask can no longer hold. Up until now, everything has been internal. Confusion, shock, disbelief. But this is the stage where the cracks start to show on the outside, because the image they carefully maintain depends on being seen. And without your presence, the performance begins to falter. They slip. Stories contradict each other. The charm feels forced. The confidence arrives a second too late. Without you there to absorb the emotional overflow, regulate the tension, or smooth the edges, their behavior becomes erratic. The role they played so well no longer fits the moment. This is where people around them start to notice something is off. The laughter sounds hollow. The certainty feels brittle. They may appear louder, more animated, more polished, but it reads as overcompensation. A costume worn too tightly. Because maintaining the mask requires energy, and your absence has drained their supply. Inside, panic is growing. Not dramatic panic, controlled panic. The kind that hides behind a smile and clenched jaw. They're trying to hold themselves together while sensing that the illusion is slipping. And the more they try to perform, the more obvious the cracks become. For you, this stage passes almost unnoticed. You're no longer watching closely. You're no longer invested in whether the mask stays on or falls off. That detachment is what makes it so destabilizing for them. The audience they needed most is gone, and without it, the act loses meaning. This is the moment when the collapse becomes visible, not in some explosive breakdown, but in subtle unraveling. In inconsistencies, in desperation disguised as confidence, in the quiet understanding that without someone to reflect the image back, the mask has nothing to cling to. And once the mask starts to slip, it cannot be put back on the same way again. And when the mask can no longer stay in place, when the cracks become impossible to hide, something erupts that looks like power but is anything but rage. Not the kind rooted in strength or certainty, but the kind born from fear. Fear of exposure, fear of irrelevance, fear of being seen without the armor that once protected them. The anger may come suddenly, sharp words, accusations, dramatic shifts in tone, or it may simmer quietly, leaking out as bitterness, sarcasm, or cold contempt. Either way, it's not about you. It's about the terror of losing control completely. This rage is a last attempt to feel dominant. If they can't pull you back with charm, guilt, or confusion, they'll try force. Emotional force. Psychological pressure. Because anger to them still feels like connection, still feels like impact, still feels like proof that they matter. But here's the truth hiding beneath it all. Rage is panic with a raised voice. They are not angry because you left. They are angry because you are no longer reachable. Because their words don't land the same way. Because the reactions they depended on no longer arrive. And without those reactions, they are left facing an unbearable silence one. They cannot control. For you, this stage is often the most clarifying. You see the anger for what it is. You recognize that it's not a sign of love, passion, or loss. It's the sound of someone losing their grip. And instead of pulling you back in, it pushes you further away. Your calm becomes their mirror. Your detachment reflects their chaos. And that contrast is devastating for someone who once believed they held all the power, because the more grounded you become, the more their rage exposes the truth. Dominance without influence is empty. Control without access is meaningless. And the storm they create can no longer reach you. And when the storm no longer reaches you, when the rage dissolves into silence, the search begins. They look outward now, scanning faces, conversations, rooms anywhere a reflection might appear. Someone new to admire them, to validate them, to echo back the version of themselves that feels powerful and whole. This isn't connection, it's substitution. A frantic attempt to replace the mirror they lost. But here's what they don't expect. Every new reflection feels weaker than the last. The admiration fades faster. The excitement burns out sooner. Because what they're really ing isn't a person, it's a feeling they had when you were there, the sense of certainty, the illusion of being anchored. They repeat old patterns, tell the same stories, deploy the same charm. Yet something is off. Without the depth of history, without the emotional investment you once gave, the reflection feels shallow. And no matter how many faces they cycle through, none of them restore what was lost. Meanwhile, something final is happening within you. You're no longer looking back. You're no longer checking for signs of collapse or validation of your decision. The space that once felt strange now feels like home. Your energy is no longer tied to someone else's perception of you. This is the quiet ending they can't touch. They may still search, they may still perform, they may still tell themselves they've moved on. But deep down, there is an awareness they can't outrun the realization that the one mirror that truly mattered walked away without needing to explain why. And that awareness lingers, not as punishment, not as revenge, but as consequence. Because while they search for reflections, you are no longer reflecting anything but your own truth. You are building a life that doesn't require an audience, a sense of self that doesn't depend on being chosen, and that is where the story truly ends, not with their collapse, but with your freedom. And when the searching no longer satisfies, when every new reflection fades too quickly, they are left with something they have avoided for a lifetime: emptiness. Not loneliness, their world may still be full of people. Not boredom, they may stay busy, distracted, surrounded by noise. This emptiness is deeper than all of that. It's the hollow space that appears when manipulation stops working, when attention no longer fills the gaps. When there's nothing left to borrow from others to feel real. This is the moment the truth stands exposed. Without someone to manage emotions for them, without someone to project meaning onto, they face the absence of an inner core. No steady sense of self. No internal reassurance. Just a quiet, unsettling void where identity should have been built long ago. And this is why your absence mattered so much. You didn't just leave a relationship. You removed a structure that helped them avoid themselves. You were a bridge over that emptiness, absorbing it, soothing it, distracting from it. When you walked away, the bridge collapsed. And now there's nothing left between them and the truth. They may try to outrun it with constant motion. They may fill their days with noise, their nights with company, their minds with stories of how none of this is their fault. But emptiness is patient. It waits, and it always resurfaces in the quiet moments they can't control. For you, this stage is invisible but profound. You are no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. The heaviness you once felt wasn't love's weight, it was emotional labor disguised as loyalty. And now, without it, you feel lighter, clearer, more grounded in yourself than ever before. This is the unspoken truth. When you stop trying to fill someone else's void, you finally had room to fill your own life with meaning. And what they experience as emptiness, you experience as release, and in that release, something extraordinary happens. Quietly, without applause or announcement. You win. Not the kind of victory that demands witnesses, not the kind that posts receipts or waits for acknowledgement. This victory happens in the small, ordinary moments where peace replaces tension, where your body no longer braces for impact, where your thoughts are finally your own, while they sit with emptiness, searching for something external to fill it. You are rebuilding from the inside out. Slowly, gently, with intention. You begin to trust your instincts again. You stop second guessing your reality. You realize how much of yourself you had minimized just to keep someone else comfortable. This is the quiet victory no one prepares you for. There's no dramatic closure scene, no confession, no sudden realization on their part that validates your pain. And strangely enough, you no longer need it. Healing doesn't crave witnesses. It thrives in solitude, consistency, and self-respect. You notice the difference in how you breathe, in how you sleep, in how laughter feels lighter, less guarded. The nervous system that once lived in survival mode begins to soften. And with that softness comes clarity. You were never too much. You were simply giving to someone who could never hold what you offered. What makes this victory so powerful is that it cost them everything they relied on and cost you nothing but what was already hurting you. You didn't take revenge. You didn't need to prove anything. You just chose yourself again and again until it became natural. And here's the part they will never fully understand. Your peace doesn't need their collapse to exist. Their emptiness doesn't validate your healing. You are not healed because they lost. You are healed because you stopped losing yourself. This is why your victory is silent. Because it was never about them in the end. It was about reclaiming your life, your energy, your sense of worth. And once you have that, you don't look back not out of anger, but out of freedom. And once you reach that place of quiet victory, the final truth becomes clear. Freedom is the last, unshakable word. Because freedom is not just the absence of their presence. It is not a statement to the world or a performance for anyone else. It is the space you create when you stop bending, stop explaining, stop hoping to be reflected in someone else's distorted mirror. Freedom is the life you live on your own terms, the one you had to reclaim quietly, patiently, without fanfare. When they realize you are no longer reachable, their collapse begins. But your freedom isn't about their reaction, it's about your choice. Every decision you made, step back, to disengage, to honor your own boundaries, was a brick in the foundation of this freedom. And that foundation cannot be shaken by their rage, their confusion, or their desperate search for validation. It is here, in this space, that you understand the full power of letting go. You don't just survive the encounter, you thrive beyond it. You are no longer tethered to their drama, their manipulations, or their expectations. Instead, your life becomes a reflection of something deeper: self-respect, clarity, and inner peace. And the beauty of this freedom is subtle but profound. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply exists, and in its existence, it changes everything. The energy once spent on worry, on argument, on trying to make them see now fuels your growth. Your creativity, your joy, your presence all expand into spaces that were once blocked. So while they search, rage, and feel the emptiness you left behind, you are already walking into a life they cannot touch. You have given yourself the gift they could never take: autonomy, your peace, your joy, your freedom. It is yours, fully, irrevocably. And in that truth lies the ultimate victory. And so here's what I want you to take with you, because this is the part that changes everything. The story we've explored isn't about them. It's about you. It's about the power you always had, the strength you may have forgotten, the clarity you can reclaim when you finally stop giving your inner joy to someone who never valued it. Every stage we walked through, the confusion, the denial, the rage, the emptiness, was never a reflection of your weakness. It was a reflection of their need for control, for validation, for mirrors to feed, an image that never belonged to them. What matters now is what comes after. Because when you let go, when you stop fighting to be seen by someone unwilling to see you, something remarkable happens. You begin to rebuild your life in a way that cannot be shaken by their presence or absence. You begin to trust your instincts, to honor your boundaries, and to invest your energy in people, projects, and passions that truly matter. You begin to experience joy that doesn't demand permission, confidence that doesn't require validation, and freedom that cannot be stolen. And here's the truth that will keep you moving forward. Long after this moment, they will never understand your calm, your peace, or your self-respect, not because it's unnoticeable, but because it cannot be manufactured, manipulated, or controlled. They may search, rage, or even try to reclaim what they lost, but you've already moved past all of that. You've stepped into a life built on your terms, and no one can take that away. So let this be your takeaway. Walking away is not weakness, it is power. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it is survival. And reclaiming your freedom is not just the ending, they are the ending, but you. You are the beginning of everything that finally belongs to you. Stay there, own it, and watch how your life blooms when it is no longer tethered to someone else's illusions.